you went under the wheels.
How affected.
Welcome to Under the Wheels. I'm Matthew.
And I'm Gabe.
And in today's episode, we're discussing the latest miniseries from, I guess it's not the latest miniseries, it's been a couple of weeks, so now it's old tea. But the latest miniseries from Netflix, Midnight Mass. Or the latest miniseries worth talking about.
It's the latest miniseries from Mike Flanagan, which is still correct and accurate.
True. Although his next one, they're already talking about, and Mark Hamill is going to be in it, so I'm excited about that.
Is it an original one, or is he going back to adaptations?
It's an adaptation
Okay.
of a bunch of. In this case, it's going to be a bunch of Edgar Allan Poe stuff. It's supposed to. I guess I don't know if it's like. I don't know if there's the Midnight Club, but there's also the Fall of the House of Usher. That's the one that I heard about recently, and I guess the Midnight Club is his next one, and that's in post-production, according to Wikipedia. Please go and donate to Wikipedia so that it can still remain one of my primary sources for this podcast, which is free.
I wonder if Mike Flanagan ever wakes up and is just turns to Kate Siegel and goes, "I don't want to make spooky stuff anymore."
Or like, I don't want to kill you anymore in my stuff.
I just want to make like
Oh shit, spoilers.
like oh yeah, seriously. I just want to make like 20th century women, but like my way, you know? Like I don't want to have to throw in a ghost just to stay on brand. Or no, what if he's like, I want to make like a Paul Feig style comedy where it's like there's just kind of a loose outline and then we get a bunch of SNL people to improv around it. He's like, I really want to do that. That's like my passion, but I'm stuck making horror movies and shows because I somehow got that Ouija job and it turned out way better than it should have been.
No, he's like, I want to make a Paul Feig style comedy. Gets the funding for it, but it's just like, it's like 20% Paul Feig style comedy and then like 80% like very sappy, emotionally resonant ideals with a very bittersweet ending. Yeah.
No, he gets the money, but like the content, like the
that's what I would think would happen.
It's contingent upon he has to have some kind of like ghost or monster in it. And he's like, "Please, I don't want to." It's like, "No, you're not getting the money unless you put a ghost in it."
Ghostbusters Answer the Call by Mike Flanagan remake. But it's somehow better just because it's more emotionally relevant. Revenant.
There's like a Revenant. That's the ghost that they're going after. It's the Revenant.
Leonardo DiCaprio is a Ghostbuster fighting a giant ghost of a bear,
It's
but
just
the bear
him
looks like a
crawling on
monster.
the ground, going. "Ah!" And someone's like, "I keep hearing weird noises, man. What's going on?" There's trails of blood on the floor of my hotel. Can you help me figure out what's going on?
He wraps himself in all of his blankets and just sits on the floor, and then he stares, and the camera like really slowly pans to Florence Pugh and all of the flowers, like staring back at him with the exact same expression.
It's funny how like most ghost movies are like ghosts are a metaphor for the past and its effect on the present and like how we have to deal with it and come to terms with the things that have happened, even if they're uncomfortable. And then in Ghostbusters, they're like, "Look, a ghost, shoot it."
We take a scientific approach, but ghosts are real. Wait, but what is they look bad and scary and kind of goofy, and we wants them dead. Okay. All right.
Speaking of elaborate metaphors,
Midnight Mass.
What do you think of
What was
Midnight
it?
Mass?
I thought Midnight Mass was a low shiny and chrome.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
I thought it was a shiny and chrome. I liked it a lot.
I figured you did. There's not a lot not to like, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, it was interesting because Haunting of Bly Manor was not so good, and I don't know. I heard all the chatter about Midnight Mass being like having a lot of the same problems, especially being like, being stuffed with crazy extended monologues that were like kind of awkwardly written and that like stretch to be philosophical in a way that just comes off like really silly. Like a lot of the philosophical monologues and dialogues in Bly Manor come off as like 3 a.m. stoner talk, where it's like, dude, what if like we're all just like asleep right now, but then like if we die, that's like when we wake up, and then everyone's like, whoa, dude. That's haunting of Bly Manor in a nutshell.
You live the same 8 days over in 5 seconds as you're dying. Bly Manor. I actually like Bly Manor a lot. So I just think that my thing is I wish that it had a singular creative hand under the director's chair. Mm-hmm. That's the only thing that kind of didn't work as well for me. But again, I would say the last 2 episodes of Bly Manor I like a lot. I know you didn't like the second to last episode, but the last 2 episodes I liked a lot. It did feel like it took a little bit too much time to kind of tell its story.
I mean, I didn't like Bly Manor generally.
Yeah, I know, but I remember the second to last episode when you're like, okay, we're almost coming to an end, and then it's like, let's go back to the 1800s.
Oh my god,
you're like,
yeah,
oh,
where it's like the last 3 or 4 episodes all have the same cliffhanger.
Yeah, yep,
that was pretty bad. So yeah, I heard all these things and was kind of like, oh, I guess I'll just skip Midnight Mass, but then after seeing Mike and Jay, like at Red Letter Media, just go like, this is the best thing ever. I'm like, okay, I guess I'll give it a shot. And it's actually really good. And yes, it does all of the bad things that Bly Manor does, but it does them correctly for the most part. So they're not nearly as bad. Like there's still parts where, like a guy walks into a room and someone's like, hey, do you want a peanut butter sandwich or a ham sandwich? And he's like, I can't eat ham sandwiches anymore, not since the accident. The accident was, and he just goes on for like 10 minutes. But it's executed so much better in Midnight Mass than it is in Bly Manor.
I'm just imagining in real life, you're like making sandwiches and this guy walks in with a giant beard reeking of rum. And you're just like, hey, do you want a ham sandwich or a turkey sandwich? Ham sandwich. Goes over the origin, the etymology, and then starts talking about the philosophical nature of killing pigs versus just letting them suffocate and like going on this long tangent that somehow relates to his life story and his descent into alcoholism.
Yeah, well, it's like the first episode of Midnight Mass is the worst one, like by far. And one of the worst part of the first episode is when I guess we'll set this up. So the story is about a small fishing island called Crockett, and where like everyone knows each other. Most of the island is like super duper Catholic. So things start to change and strange things start happening on the island when 2 new people arrive. Or not 2 new people, but two people who haven't been there in a while, at least. There's Riley, who grew up on the island, left to go pursue a career in finance, ended up killing someone in a drunk driving accident, and then was in prison for a few years. And then upon his release, he's released into the custody of his parents, so he goes home to the island after being away for a long time. The other person who arrives is kind of a mysterious new priest named Paul, who is taking over for the previous priest, who is like super duper old and kind of AWOL after going on it's not a birthright Israel trip because he's not Jewish, but like the same thing for Catholics.
Right.
So anyway, like Riley comes back and he's at his parents' house, and he's been away from the island for all these years, And he sits down, and his mom walks in, and he's like, it's like, so he has a very fractious relationship with his dad. Like, his dad wasn't there to greet him when he got off the boat. So he's like, Dad really couldn't come out to see me. And his mom's like, well, your dad's been working very hard. He still cares about you, but it's just things have been tough. Ever since the spill, gosh, it's been about 3 years now. Things were really different after the spill. You couldn't catch anything around here. And as you know, fishing is our livelihood. And then she goes on for 10 minutes, like just this huge, obvious, like heavy-handed exposition dump out of nowhere. And I'm just sitting there like, Jesus, I really hope the rest of the show is not like this. And thankfully it's not. But like, it was so egregious.
We've talked about exposition dialogue before, right?
Yeah, well, it made me think as she was talking, the first thought that popped into my head was when you and I were joking about the apartment. It's like, oh, hey, stay 10 feet away. I can tell you're sick because you got tissues in your pocket. Like that, like that kind of writing. But yeah, that's the only instance of a just naked exposition dump coming out of nowhere. Because all the other... There are a lot of speeches, there's a lot of monologues, and there's a lot of dialogues where people take turns speaking for a very long time. So it feels like more of an exchange of monologues, or like monologues that are in dialogue with each other. But those are all, like, for the rest of the show, they're all executed really well. And the level of, like, preachiness, I guess, is... Like, it makes sense contextually given what's going on in the scene.
I mean, it's definitely like express your ideas, the miniseries.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, like, there's a lot of like meditation on religion and atheism, good and bad. What does it mean to be a good person, a bad person? How do you get redemption? Finding closure, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
To speak like a person who hasn't watched it, that's what I sound like. But yeah, so like you were saying, there's like in the first episode, the son comes back, he killed someone, and then this young priest comes back, and then go ahead and go on.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just the show is mostly like. It's mostly like 6 Feet Under. Like it's a drama about like people coming to terms with dying and like what it means to live a good life. But then there's just kind of like some spooky shit shoehorned in that generally takes a back seat to everything else, to all the character and thematic stuff. But it does like... It enhances it. It's not like a distraction of like, oh, we need a monster to appear now. Like the monsters and stuff they choose and how they go about it do play into the themes really well. I think one thing that kind of works against it is that because the show is so honest about what it's about, what its themes are, what its point of view is, and the conversation it wants to have with the audience. The plot is like, you can guess the plot of the whole show after like an episode and a half. I think like an episode and a half in, I already knew everything that was going to happen. But that was okay, because it's like the machinations of the plot and the horror elements are really secondary.
Yeah.
To... Again, like all of just the character and thematic stuff that's going on, because that ends up being what's more interesting. It's like, who are these people? Like, what do they want out of life? Like, why are they here? Why are they doing what they're doing? And like, like what do they have to say for themselves? I think that's all the really interesting stuff, and watching their journeys, and also just hating on Bev.
Yeah.
Like all those things kind of keep you through the show, because like if you're attentive at all, you know the entire supernatural plot within like an episode and a half. And the thing is that the show is in terms of the plot and hiding its hand, which it does poorly, it seems to be aware of the fact that like anyone who pays any attention is going to guess everything like really early. So the show spills the beans pretty early as well. Like about
4 episodes in.
Yeah, a little less than halfway through, it basically just says everything that's going on. So like I actually kind of like that, where it's like instead of pretending like it could hide anything, because it couldn't. It was like, you've probably already guessed everything by this point. So here you go. Here's what's happening, and then the rest of the show is just going to be about how it all plays out.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it does a good job of like, I don't necessarily see everything coming as it's happening, but maybe like a split second before, or maybe like half a minute more, or half a minute earlier, I would find something out. So like the big reveal in episode 4, it's like, okay, you know something weird is going on. I did not. Should we just put a spoiler thing on the whole thing, even though I kind of spoiled part of it already? Or should we talk a little bit more and then get into spoilers?
Let's talk a little bit more. It's one of those shows where like I think people might be upset if it's spoiled for them, but
okay, so we'll.
I want people to go into it with fresh eyes. So it's like, if you haven't seen it, please check it out. It's a show that even if we do spoil it for you, that shouldn't really take away anything.
Yeah,
it's like one of those shows like you could have it spoiled and it's still just as good, but
the compelling thing to watch it for is sort of like the way that it discusses its themes, the performances, which are all really good.
Yes.
The intricate character work, the really good visuals. Like, I like the cinematography a lot. I like the editing.
Yeah, it looks really good.
Just watching Mike Flanagan move his pieces around the chessboard is fun to watch. But like the major revelation that happens, where it sort of starts explaining the character and some of the things, I felt like I was just like a half a beat early in figuring it out. So I did feel like I was figuring it out at the same time. The 5th episode has a twist in it that I didn't see coming. The way that they execute a lot of the things that you would probably see coming, especially in like the 6th episode and the ultimate conclusion of the series in the 7th episode, are done in a way that, like, while I might not absolutely love, because I think the one thing that I didn't absolutely love was sort of the conclusion of what would have to happen to everything in the show. I didn't like the ultimate conclusion it came to. I think the execution of it, even if it was a little bit long, the execution of that was significantly better than what it could have been if they didn't, for example, have 7 hours to tell this story, or if not every single decision was thought out so thoroughly. So like, that's why I give it like a low shiny, because I think the show can be a bit long-winded, which, you know, that's a creative choice when you're doing a big series like this. But the performances were really good. It took some turns that I didn't love, but I could see as being necessary. I don't know how you would have written around them. Yeah. But overall, like, especially the messaging on like the ideas of religion and atheism, and like, I feel like it takes a very, I like the stance that it takes in regards to religion and atheism, because they, you know, obviously it's a very Catholic thing, and the easy thing to do would be to like demonize all people who are Catholic in this show, and it chooses to show a lot more nuance towards all religion and all sort of practicing of it.
It's very psychologically realistic, where, you know, it's... So, I mean, Mike Flanagan is a lapsed Catholic. He is a former alcoholic as well, which is why the show... I mean, the show seems to be very personal to him. I know he's trying to make it for a long time. But, I mean, the show is very much about religion generally, but Catholicism specifically, and addiction and recovery, and how the two are often intertwined. Like, the AA program has a religious basis. So it's like,
Yeah.
So, being about religion and addiction and recovery, those two go together as well. But, it takes the position that, like, religious people mean well. And they're just, like, everyone, all the people in the show, except for one person, all the people in the show are just regular people. They're just trying to live their lives, trying to do the right thing, trying to take care of the people that they care about. And because of their faith and kind of the power dynamics embedded within it, they, even though they have the best intentions, get caught up in things they don't quite understand and end up doing a lot of harm to themselves and to each other. And that's kind of the interesting exploration of religion that the show goes into, because it's not like trying to prove religion is right or wrong or good or bad. It's more about, like, what psychological effect does it have on people as individuals and as communities? Because, a big part of religion is also community, and, like, the bonds that you form with other people who share your faith. And in this case, like, how those bonds can help and bring people together, but also how they can be exploited.
Like, they kind of outline it early on when it's like, oh, this big oil disaster, instead of, like, bolstering the local group and everything with the settlement, we just built a giant recreation center that's become the centerpiece of the town.
Well, yeah, so it's like there's a big thing about, like, quoting the Bible in the show, which you see it just a lot in real life, where people can, because religious texts tend to be very vague in the way that they're written. They can be quoted any which way. So people quote the Bible throughout the show to justify anything and everything, good, bad, in between. People talk about, like, people quote the, like, very supernatural parts of the Bible metaphorically, and they also quote them very literally, depending on what point they're trying to make. But it's like, people will find any justification they can to believe what they believe, because at the end of the day, like, one of the other things that the show makes a point of very subtly, which I really liked, was that, this idea that, like, what you believe is your kind of your identity, and that like, that informs everything else. Like, humans are not necessarily empirical creatures who are like, well, let me gather evidence and decide what my worldview is. We kind of work the opposite way, where we have a worldview and then we bend everything else to suit it. So it takes all these characters who, despite having a similar background, similar upbringing, they all go to the same church, they all know each other, they all have different views about the world, about what it means to be a good person, live a good life, what our purpose is. And then they bend their religion and everything else to fit how they see the world. And the ways in which that is done is as numerous as there are characters in the show.
I think the part that sticks with me the most, at least on my initial viewing, was the dialogue that they had when the sheriff, who is Muslim and his son is Muslim, the sheriff is searching his son's bag and he finds a copy of the Bible, and there's that big town hall conference where they're like, okay, well, let's like talk about this. And, everyone is kind of like, oh, well, you're just against it because we gave him a copy of the Bible. And he's like, well, no, it's that you gave it to him without asking permission or anything like that. Like, how would you feel if I did this? And of course, the conversation ends up getting sidetracked, as these kinds of conversations do. Mm-hmm. But also, that was the most frustrating conversation for me, because I was like, well, there's clearly, like, angles that needed to be explored in this question, or in this sort of, like, conference, and more things that needed to have been said. But it all was just kind of cut off a little bit, like a fraction too early. I would have liked them to present one more angle to sort of, like, discuss. And again, it devolves into like it instead of having like a constructive conversation, it just devolves into sort of like fear mongering type stuff.
Yeah, which is again how those things tend to go.
It usually happens. I was personally like, but if I were there and I had already made a good point like that, like I would have said one more, and it's a really easy point that you could have made. It's a really easy additional point that like in the moment you could have just said it and then seen how they responded. But but yeah, like that's again when it gets into the long discussions of things like that, it's like okay,
well, the show also starts to become about like there's the two main characters being Riley and the priest, and Paul, the two kind of newcomers to the island, but it also centers on like the island's outsiders, like people who don't fit in with the I guess dominant population. So there's like there's the doctor who's gay and is also like an empiricist. She's like evidence all the time. Yeah. She doesn't really have faith in anything. There is obviously the sheriff, who is not named Ali, unfortunately.
Nope.
And his son, who are both Muslim. There's the town drunk, who is like who's a pariah because of a shooting accident where he paralyzed a girl. Yeah. And there's the Kate Siegel's character. Is it like Emily? I think.
I believe yes. Erin.
Where like she left the island for a very long time, kind of had a lot of wild and crazy adventures across the United States, and then came back. And she is very deeply religious and feels plugged into this community in a certain way, but she has a heavy, heavy sense of cynicism and sees a lot of the darkness in people that other folks on the island kind of just want to overlook. And that sets her apart from them in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like all of these characters they use to explore like the different facets, because again, it's like to me it's on a sliding scale for the most part. Like you have I think what's really compelling was like the conclusion that they came to in the final episode, but without spoiling it, like Riley's mother is a very devout Catholic, and Bev Keane, which by the way, like fantastic performance by Samantha Sloyan.
Good.
Like that is not an easy role to play, because it's just so easy to be like annoying and hated. So, but like she does it with such conviction, and she does it so assuredly, like it's every fiber of her being. I really hope she's like a sweetheart in real life, and she's just putting on a fantastic performance.
Well, it's like it's one of those things where it's like the character she plays done wrong would be just annoying, but her performance is so good. Like she's the focal point of all the audience's hatred in the show. Like she is just so hateable.
She's so good at it too,
because she's so just like she is so insanely evil, but like in the very subtle ways that make it like they don't feel outlandish. Like my my classic example of a cartoonishly evil character is Riz Ahmed's evil CEO from Venom. Who's just like, I'm evil, mwahaha, die. And Bev Keane is basically that, but she's written and performed in such a realistic way that you basically have like this cartoon supervillain on paper who in execution is like this very fully realized person, which is impressive.
One of my favorite villain arcs is always like, I talk about Gaston from the animated Beauty and the Beast, specifically because and there's a lot of other examples of this. This is just the easiest one for me to find. But like at the beginning of the movie, he's like this dopey, goofish buffoon of a chauvinist. But by the end, it's like he has corralled the whole town to do an assault. He has the beast's life in his hand, and he becomes this like sinister form of evil. And the way that they handle that trajectory is so good in Beauty and the Beast. That's why I always come back to that, because it's like you can see the arc of evil in him. Like the seeds are planted early and they develop really well. And it's kind of the same with sort of like how Bev Keane develops. It's like, okay, you see her and you're like, all right, she's your obvious sort of like annoying kind of this type of character, this type of character basis. And you kind of know where it's going, but like by the time it escalates to the point where it needs to escalate to, it feels so earned and satisfying. And like it's just a very good, like in a world where we have really poorly developed villains and we're trying to force more sort of a lot of nuance on villains, where it's like, oh, maybe they're not bad actually, or like they're too, I feel like we have a lack of like good, solid, grounded villains, and this is just one of those examples where I was like, nope, you got it right.
Yeah,
you did it well.
Exactly. So I think a lot of writers have forgotten the point of having a villain, like what they serve narratively, where it's like a lot of folks try to write villains to be sympathetic, where it's like, oh, they actually have a point. Maybe they're right. And then the hero has to stop them anyway, even though they're right somehow, maybe because their method is wrong, which is so fucking stupid.
What are you talking about? That's villain writing 101.
Oh, God. The point of a good villain is if you think about a story as a conversation, right? The hero represents the right idea, which they either represent from the beginning or it's something they discover along the way. And then the villain represents the wrong idea, which is something that they just sort of embody. The wrong idea can be compelling, but it's important to explain why it's compelling and why it's still wrong in spite of being compelling. And Bev Keane represents a certain set of ideas. And those ideas are horrible, even though at times for all of us, I think in some way, religious or not, that's a part of our nature. That's a part of how we are in our worst moments. It's a part of our worst selves. But it is never ambiguous that she is just pure evil. Like, she's wrong, Right. And that she is like an embodiment of how we can be when we're at our worst.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that's important to point out was like the whole thing on like meditations on religion in this show. One of the reasons I think it does a good job in nuance is like, in spite of religion, Bev would be a horrible person. Like, she would find something else, like you were saying, she would find something else to justify her methods or what she does. She just uses that as sort of like a conduit and sort of a bastardization of like good principles she uses to facilitate her own selfish needs.
Exactly. Like, her being religious enhances all of her awfulness, but like, if she wasn't religious, she would still be terrible. It's just like there's a very happy marriage there. Also, speaking of performances, I want to nominate Rahul Kohli, who plays the sheriff.
Yeah.
For the Raleigh Beckett Award for Worst American Accent.
I like Rahul Kohli. Yeah, I agree with you on his American accent, but I like him. His
performance is fine, but his accent is outrageous.
I like him in this, and I liked him in Bly Manor, and I appreciate really bad accents. We do have Henry Thomas in here who had a fantastic British accent in Bly Manor. So
yeah,
Rahul Kohli returning the favor here.
As bad as Henry Thomas's British accent is, Rahul Kohli's American accent is just as bad. But the Raleigh Beckett Award is for non-Americans trying to do an American accent.
So good. Oh my god.
Like every time he says Christian in the show, I'm like, no, there's no one on the face of the United States who says Christian like that. Christian. You're not a Christian. It's like, okay, Mr. I'm from New York. I'm a New York cop. Christian. You're not a Christian. It's like, okay, Mr. I'm from New York. I'm a New York cop. Christian. You're not a Christian. It's like, okay, Mr. I'm from New York. I'm a New York cop. I believe you. I totally believe you're from New York with like when you talk like that. Oh yeah, for sure. Just say gabagool and you got it.
It's like, and then Bob is your uncle. Like, wait, whoa, what? Where did that come from, buddy? Bob is your uncle. Like, no, we don't say that here. No, yeah, Raul Coley was yeah. But yeah, like as just going quickly back to Bev Keane and Riley's father or mother, it's like they're both devoutly religious. They take different paths and they see it differently. So that was one of the things that I liked a lot about the show, or like how a lot of people would come to the same conclusions, just different ways.
Yeah, well, so like Riley's mother has one of the more interesting arcs in the show because she's just as devout as Bev, but she's the kind of like, whereas Bev is very just power hungry. She's angry. Because her whole thing is that she has nothing to live for. Basically, Bev has no life. No one likes her. She's all alone and has no real purpose or meaning in the world. So her faith drives kind of her angry, vile, vengeful hatred of everyone. Whereas Riley's mom is like, she wants to see the good in everything to the point where she is like completely ignorant of things that are right in front of her.
Right.
She's like, oh, everything's fine. God will take care of us. Like, just have faith. Everything's going to be okay. She's very like happy-go-lucky. She's very supportive of Riley, even though he's, done horrible things. He's very traumatized by the horrible things he's done. And like is trying to make amends and stuff. But then when bad things do cross her doorstep, she just kind of like, she shuts down. She puts her blinders on. She's like, no, why would you say something like that? Like, why would you say something bad? Like she's that kind of a person.
Yeah.
And then in the end, spoilers, she undergoes a change of heart and kind of wakes up to the world around her and says, it's like having faith that God will take care of you doesn't mean burying your head in the sand. Like being saved doesn't mean being ignorant. Like you can still, like you still have an obligation to like deal with the bad shit that's around you. So yeah, I mean that's like it's a small thing, and like she's kind of a minor character, but like a lot of characters in the show go through these little story arcs that are really cool.
Yeah.
I guess should we get into spoilers?
Yeah, let's just do it.
All right.
Actually, yeah, let's get into spoilers.
Okay, so the priest of the town that went to Israel for his...
Well, wait, hold on. Also, by the way, like Hamish Linklater was excellent in the show.
Oh, Hamish Linklater gives the performance of a lifetime. Like this is his I don't know. This is like this is his Peter O'Toole and Lawrence of Arabia moment. Like, he eats up the screen every second that he's on camera.
He has finally transcended being on The New Adventures of Old Christine.
Yes.
No, he's excellent in it. There's a reason his face is so giant on every poster you see about this. He's so committed wholeheartedly to it. Now, with that said, go ahead.
Okay. So Hamish Linklater plays Paul, the new priest. The old priest, when he traveled to Israel, got lost in a sandstorm. And the old priest is also senile. Got lost in a sandstorm, stumbles into an ancient cave where there's a vampire. The vampire attacks him, drinks his blood, and then gives him some of his own blood. And in his kind of old man delusions, he thinks the vampire is an angel. The vampire restores the old priest to his youth, and he is Paul. So Paul, the new priest, is the old priest, but restored to his youth through vampire magic. thinking the vampire is an angel, he brings the vampire back to Crockett Island to turn everyone else into vampires, believing that this is some kind of miracle, and that he's going to resurrect the island and allow all the people who live there to transcend, to beat death. And the way he does this is by pouring vampire blood into the wine that they use for communion. And is sort of like, doesn't care about the consequences of it. He's like, this is, obviously bringing a vampire to your island and trying to turn everyone else into vampires is a horrible, horrible thing. But Paul convinces himself that, no, this is actually a really good thing. The vampire is an angel, and he's going to help all these people. He's going to heal everyone who's old, who's sick, the girl who's paralyzed. They're all going to be restored to youth, and they're going to live forever, and it'll be awesome. And, he and other collaborators of his who he kind of divulges this to all justify it by quoting the Bible. There's, a million quotes that you can find that they use to justify what they want to do. Right. And then a whole bunch of crazy shit happens. I mean, they start to, the vampire starts preying on, eating people, kidnapping people, and just killing them because he's hungry. As Paul starts to turn into a vampire, he begins losing control and starts killing people, which he then justifies as God acting through him. Right. And then
feeling no remorse either.
And feeling no remorse. Paul has an improvised AA sessions with Riley, where Riley keeps having to go to AA on the mainland, and Paul's like, well, I'll host an AA here, and you can come, and the town drunk can come, and we can all talk. Paul kills the town drunk in a fit of bloodlust, and Riley goes to investigate, and Riley stumbles upon the vampire and ends up getting turned into one. So they have this long conversation about, guilt and violence and, what this all means. And Riley ends up finding Aaron, who's his long-lost, love interest, explaining to her that Paul is trying to turn everyone into vampires. And then to prove to her that he's not lying, he sits with her to watch the sunrise, and he bursts into flames and dies. So then Aaron and a few other kind of skeptical people on the island try to stop Paul and Bev and their plans. And Paul can no longer go out in the sun after a certain point because he's a vampire. So he hosts a midnight mass for Easter, hence the name of the show. At which point he reveals the angel, gives this crazy sermon, and turns everyone into vampires, where they all kill each other in this crazy massacre. And then people who took in the vampire blood come back to life. It's at this point that Paul has a change of heart and realizes he's made a horrible mistake. Meanwhile, Bev thinks this is the way to make herself queen of the island and have power over everyone. Right. So she just goes nuts. And she leads all the other vampires on basically a massacre where they kill everyone on the island. And then whoever dies and has been going to communion will come back, and whoever hasn't been will stay dead. And Bev thinks, this is perfect. I get to kill all the non-Catholics, and everyone who is Catholic will join me in being a vampire. And Paul, the priest, is like, what have I done? This is a horrible mistake. Right. So then it's kind of up to the outsiders, being, the lesbian doctor, the Muslim sheriff, Aaron, who, again, is very, very deeply Catholic, but has a certain level of jaded realist in her that, won't allow her to fall in line with everyone else, to stop everything. And Paul also ends up kind of joining them in a way. And the other
the lesbian doctor's mom as well.
Yeah, so the lesbian doctor's mom is a super old lady who's very senile, who ends up being restored to a much younger version of herself by the vampire blood. And you find out that the thing that changes Paul's mind is the vampire attacks her and kills her, but then she comes back to life as a vampire. And then you find out that the reason why, Paul and her are so close is because that they had an affair when both of them were much, much younger, and that the lesbian doctor is the priest's daughter. And it's a really cool way they kind of they hint at it at first, and then they come back to it later, where it's in the second episode, you see Paul kind of staring at her, and the lesbian doctor's on a date with another woman at this big cookout that the island has.
Yeah, that's right.
And she says, I always feel this island is so religious, and the way that I am, I've had to live in secret. And, the old priest used to stare at me the way the current priest is staring at me right now. He knows that I'm gay, and I feel like I just have to get out of here. I don't like being subjected to this all the time. And then at the end, you find out that she's actually his daughter. And the reason why he kind of stares at her from so far away is not judgmental, but because he so desperately wants to tell her hello.
Yeah.
And that, I'm your dad. I'm sorry. I wasn't there for you, but I care about you. But he just never was able to work up the courage to do it, which is
it's very tragic.
It's very tragic, yeah. I think of all the show has a lot of emotionally resonant moments that were oh, that's nice. But I think the one moment where I did actually start getting really choked up was when Paul starts talking to the doctor's mom, and he says that the real reason he brought the vampire back to turn everyone else into vampires and stuff wasn't for religious reasons. It wasn't to, to transcend death or do anything super noble. He was saying it's I just wanted a second chance with you and with our child.
Yeah. That got me. Even Riley rowing out to the middle of the ocean and knowing that he's the way that scene at the end of episode 5 goes, where he's he rows her out there, and you're oh my god, what's going on? And they have this way that the vampires see things. It gets all weird. And they can see their artery, the people that the vampires are looking at, they can see their arteries beat, and they get a bloodlust. And you see that happening on the boat between him and Aaron, and you think for a second oh my god, what's Riley gonna do? Is he gonna attack her and suck her blood? Because the way that he's talking, he's I needed to drag you out here all alone. And they kind of set it up oh, has he become a bad guy now? And he's I know that you have the courage to do what's necessary. I wouldn't have the courage unless you were out here. And the sun comes up, and as an audience member, you slowly realize oh, he's gonna kill himself. And it serves two purposes, right? It's the in a Game of Thronesy way, it's the close to his story arc, where he can't sleep, and he constantly thinks about drowning or killing himself because of this thing that he did, where he got into the drunk driving accident that killed the girl, and he's never been able to forgive himself for it, and never been able to come to peace. And it's finally in this moment when the sun comes up, it's the very Mike Flanagan thing of let's juxtapose horror versus sentimentality, yeah. And he sees as he's about to be burned alive, it cuts, and he sees the embracing hand.
I guess let me describe the image. So it's
go ahead.
Riley and Aaron are on a rowboat sitting opposite each other talking in the middle of the ocean at night, and it looks really cool. The way the water is lit, it's very surreal. And as the sun starts rising, Riley knows he's gonna die. Like you said, he can't sleep. He hasn't been able to sleep for years. So now he's gonna finally. There's like a kind of relief in his eyes, like he's finally gonna sleep forever.
Yeah.
And yeah, he looks down, and then he looks back up, and the sunshine is like the sunrise is like the brightest, prettiest sunrise, like unnaturally pretty sunrise you've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
And across from him, instead of Aaron, it's the girl he killed. And he always sees her like all bloody and fucked up, but this time she's intact. She's her normal self. And she reaches out, she like extends his hand, or her hand to him to take, and he takes it, and it's like he's finally at peace. And then it cuts, and Aaron is screaming because he's burst into flames. Just like,
and then the
episode
ends.
That it's an edit that's very obvious, but it's very effective.
Yeah.
Like that's what's going to happen because like you're like that's too good of an idea not to do, and so they do it.
Oh my god, I was and then it just like the credits go and she's still just yelling over the credits for like 5 minutes. It's like, oh my god. Which also like reminds me of like there's a lot of moments like that, right? So like the well, I guess we haven't gotten to the ending part yet, but I guess that's one of the well, first off, let me say my first note that I wrote is Midnight Mass brought to you by Hershey's chocolate syrup. Because Jesus Christ, there's a lot of fake blood in this series, and there's a lot of people lapping up the fake blood. And if it's not Hershey's chocolate syrup, I feel bad for those actors. Get those buckets of vomit ready.
It's cornstarch and
corn. Oh god, a little bit of food coloring. Yeah, just make it
just
chocolate
a dash
syrup. So
of chocolate syrup.
God, those sticky floors. It's like half the budget of the show is just on people cleaning up the floors. Mm-hmm. The other thing is you mentioned the old woman, like her makeup job in the first couple episodes before she starts like de-aging, to me is really bad.
I mean, all of the old people makeup is really bad, but it makes sense because they have to like it's young. It's younger actors who they de-age by slowly peeling the makeup away. Like Henry Thomas's old man makeup is not good. Riley's mom's old woman makeup is not particularly good. Like all of the old people makeup is kind of cringe.
Yeah. Henry Thomas wasn't in this as much as I wanted, but he also has one of the more like compelling points, I think, to me in the show, because like there's that moment where at the end of the 6th episode he's locked in the church and everyone's massacring and mauling him, and you're like, oh no, Henry Thomas has become a vampire. And then the mom dies and meets up with Henry Thomas again, and they're, it's actually a very a nice moment. I remember seeing it. I was like, oh, this is so great. They're meeting up, and like, oh my god, what's gonna happen? And they talk about like he was afraid because he thought that you would have to feed as a vampire. Like you feel like you have that sensation and you have to do it. And he's like, yeah, but then that moment passes and you realize that, you don't have to do it.
Yeah.
So
I
we'll
really
be our
like
support structure, and it's kind of like it's tying the vampirism and the desire to drink blood to like the desire to drink alcohol for like, for a not so subtle metaphor.
Yeah.
Right in there.
Well, that's the other thing. It's like the vampires' need to feed is like the addicts' need to use, right?
Yeah.
And that's a point. Like, I mean, although obviously like the blood and communion stuff is a metaphor that's hit very hard, but also the vampire feeding addict using metaphor is hammered extremely hard as well in this show. And yeah, I mean, everyone becomes like a blood addict. They just go into a murderous frenzy, killing people, drinking their blood, except Henry Thomas. Henry Thomas, he's the one character who doesn't change at all throughout the show. He's always himself. Like, he's always kind of this stern, emotionally disconnected man who like he tries, but he just doesn't know how. Like he's angry and disappointed with his son, but he still cares about him, but he doesn't know how to say or express any of these things. But he tries. He tries really, really hard. And Yeah, at the end, he's turned into a vampire, and he's got the insane bloodlust as everyone else, but he just resists. He's like, if I was a vampire, I simply would not drink blood. Like,
Yeah.
he's that guy. I'm just built different. Because he walks around town witnessing all the like murder and devastation that all the other townspeople enact on each other. Like, these are people murdering and eating their neighbors. Who are, again, because they're in a frenzy, and he's just like very kind of inwardly focused. He's disconnected from a lot of the people and the goings on around him, and as such, he's just like, his wife asks him, like, I'm really hungry, like, have you killed anyone? He's like, nope. I mean, I'm really hungry too, but like, you can just not do it.
Yeah.
It's like you still have that responsibility over yourself to not give in.
And the wife doesn't either. The wife chooses, and they decide to like, they realize that they are in fact perfect for each other, and and I know another big component of it was like he couldn't forgive himself because he saw Riley's the accident that Riley basically caused. Well, he found that, but also like the accident that was caused, he blames himself because he feels like it was a reflection on him as a father, and how could he do that?
Yeah,
I know that's right. He does get the suicide note, but I forgot how. I guess that like the suicide note kind of like was that used to like sort of resolve the fact that the father was not responsible, and that he was. I don't remember what happened with the suicide.
Well, the suicide note is more like warning everyone about Paul and the vampires.
Okay.
And then he leaves a suicide note for Paul, which I always liked, which is, remember you are dust, and to dust you shall return.
Yeah. Back when, because like Paul, it's funny because we were talking about villains and how there's so much going on about like, oh, well, we need to have our villains be kind of like sympathetic and things like that. And there's definitely, as there's a sliding scale of like theories on religion, there's a sliding scale on how you view the various characters and how much of a villain they are. And I think like, to a certain degree, Paul can be seen as a misguided villain because he did cause the death of Aaron's baby earlier on in the season, in the series, by imposing his own will on people by giving them communion and spiking the communion bowl.
He also squad wiped the entire island.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because like he's the other kind of villain. So Beverly Keane is the true villain in the sense that she is the ideological villain. Like, she, in the conflict of ideas and meta narratives, she is the evil idea, the evil meta narrative. Whereas Paul is another kind of misguided person who believed he was saving people, wanted to believe that he was saving people, but also did this for his own selfish reasons because he was afraid of dying, because he lived a life full of regret that he didn't want to just leave behind, Right. He wanted to be, like he said, he wanted a second chance with the woman that he loved and with his daughter, and he didn't want to die never having said hello, never having, been a part of their lives. So he's like, well, what if I can make them young again and we can all be a happy family together? Yeah. And like, he believes and that's a good thing, right? And it'll be good for everyone else too. And he kind of, he convinces himself through all these, leaps of reasoning that like, oh, this is all going to be great. This is all just, I'm doing a really good thing for all these people. And it's not, it's interesting how it's contrasted with Beverly, where she wants, in terms of like what their actual objective is, they both want the same thing. But Beverly wants the apocalypse. Like, she wants to destroy all non-believers and just cause chaos and death and misery because she herself is miserable and wants to enact that upon the world. Whereas Paul,
she also thinks she's better than everyone else. She thinks that actions that she does are the best.
Well, that's a cope,
and therefore
right?
she deserves she deserves she deserves praise, and everyone else needs to suffer because they're not as devout as her.
Well, that's the ultimate cope. Is if you're all alone and miserable, it must be because you're better than everyone. It's like Squidward in SpongeBob. Squidward is a failed artist, and he's alone and he's miserable. And SpongeBob is endlessly creative and happy and carefree, and he thinks of SpongeBob as being beneath him. Yeah. Because he's miserable, and that's how he justifies his misery. It's like, well, SpongeBob's beneath me, even though, SpongeBob is better at all the creative pursuits that Squidward is trying to do, So it's that same kind of thing, whereas, Paul's motivation is like he just wants to have a family.
Mm-hmm. He's basically Ken Watanabe at the end of Inception. He's a man filled with regrets who's lived a long life. So the culminating, the ending of it is the main characters realize, I think you kind of covered some of this. I don't know if we talked in depth about it.
No, the band of outsiders, there's a night of chaos where all the vampires kill everyone, and then everyone who's been taking the vampire blood at communion comes back to life as a vampire. Everyone who hasn't just dies. All the outsiders burn down every building in town so that when the sun rises, no one has anywhere to hide.
Well, what happens is that gets started by the vampires. They start destroying
Beverly starts
houses.
burning everything in town so that everyone has to go to church and live there. Yes. And then the outsiders burn down the church and the rec center to make sure
and all the boats,
so no one can leave the island and no one can hide. And the head vampire, the quote unquote angel, has its wings ripped up by Aaron
as he's feeding on Aaron.
I know.
Oh my god!
He can't fly away. And then in the end, everyone realizes they're gonna die. The sun will rise and they will burst into flames. And all the outsiders have been killed or grievously wounded to the point that they will die.
Except for two kids in a boat.
Yeah.
Staring.
Riley's younger brother and the paralyzed girl who's no longer paralyzed. She's the daughter of the mayor. They escape on a boat. So they're the only two survivors. Everyone else either dies or bursts into flames when the sun rises. And they all have to face death, knowing that it's coming, which is kind of the ultimate... I mean, it's what the show's ultimately about. It's about facing death and what that means for living. Riley has to face the death of the person he killed and then ends up killing himself. He and Aaron have these long conversations about what do you think happens when you die? Aaron has to deal with the death of her with her miscarriage. And then everyone else has to deal with all the horrible things they've done or not done, Henry Thomas kind of leads the remaining vampires who've done all these awful things and kind of just this is the end. At least let's just come together as a town and take care of each other in this last couple minutes before the sun rises. Which I thought was a cool moment. Bev continues to try to escape death by digging a hole in the beach and trying to hide in it. And then her head explodes when the sun rises.
That was my other note, was that that was one of my other notes, is that I'm so glad Bev was not redeemed, because they have this moment where she's looking around and it's the way that they frame it, it almost looks like she's going to have this moment of coming to terms with her own selfishness and her own ego. And then it's just
and she
nope.
just can't.
Yeah, nope. We're gonna cut to her desperately shoveling sand.
Yeah.
Oh, and then, so good.
And then Paul goes to his favorite hangout spot with the doctor's mom, and they take the body of their daughter with them, and they just kind of they're able to enjoy at least a last half an hour as a real family.
Yeah.
Or as close as they're ever gonna get.
With the daughter dead because she was shot or something. There was also that moment.
What's interesting is she gets shot by Sturgis, the town handyman. Mm-hmm. And Paul tries to save her by giving her some of his blood. so that she can be reborn as a vampire, and she spits it out.
Yep.
And he kind of like looks at her, and as panicked and terrified and broken up as he is, like he almost like gains a huge amount of respect for her when she does that.
Yeah. And he kind of comes to his own realization.
Yeah, my daughter, who I was never brave enough to talk to until now, is always going to be braver than I ever was. So maybe I should try and be like her.
Yeah, and like accept death and accept these things for what they are. Also, the sheriff whose son becomes a vampire is like one of the first to become a vampire, and it's like horrifying, and it's so sad. And then the sheriff ends up like, as he's trying to burn down the church and the rec center, he gets shot, a mortal wound. And because they're both Muslim, they end with them praying to the sunrise as it rises, and the father dies, and then the son dies, and it's just like a very poignant moment. I was like, I really loved that. Like, there's a lot of stuff that I really love about the last episode. But like even the logic of it, like if even one vampire gets to the shore, it will cause an endemic and then possibly a pandemic. And so they're like, okay, well, we understand what we have to do. We understand we're sacrificing ourselves, which is always like the point that I'm a little like, we got to this point of like, we like these characters. We want some of them to live and survive. Do we really need all of them to die? Yeah, we need all of them to die. Okay. Yep. All right. Let's proceed and see how we can do it. But again, execution is everything.
What's interesting is Riley's younger brother and the girl, when they die in however many years, will become vampires.
They won't. So that's one thing that I should talk about.
Oh, I guess not, right? Because the head vampire it's implied that the head vampire dies. The angel flies away. And
the angel flies, but because his wings are clipped, he doesn't have enough time for them to heal before he dies.
We never see him burn up, is the thing. But it's implied that he dies because his magic goes away.
Well, what happens is they've surmised earlier in like the 6th episode that normally your blood will filter through the old blood. So even though you've been sucking Paul's blood this whole time, eventually your own blood will wear out and you don't have to worry about burning. So that was why at the end when the girl says like, oh, I can't feel my legs, that's confirmation of the theory that the blood will get restored.
I guess the other thing that's ambiguous is like, the doctor, because she's an empiricist, frames everything that's happening in like medical terms. But I guess the way I watch the show, I'm like, I just frame it in like vampire terms. So blood filtering, all that aside, I just sort of took it as like it's implied that the head vampire burned up because the magic that allowed the paralyzed girl to walk again is now gone.
Yeah.
When she can't feel her legs.
Yeah. And like, I guess the thing is like either way works. You can either see it as like, oh, the magic is worn off, or you can see it as like, oh, her kidneys are fucked, but at least, she's filtered all of her blood. Well, because her kidneys would get ruined filtering all of the vampire blood out.
If it is a blood filtering thing, the head vampire could still be out there.
Right, if the head vampire gets to the mainland. But like I said, I feel like the show does a good enough job implying they're like, oh, they're 30 miles out of the mainland. He's trying to fly, but the sun is literally coming up. If he gets in the water, he'll die. And that's like, he'll find a way to die. Like that's clear. Either that, or we're gonna have Midnight Mass 2 Electric Boogaloo, and then we're all fucked. And it's just a grand scale all across the United States type of thing. And it's basically just like The Last of Us, Mike Flanagan style. So
that would kind of suck.
Yeah, well, if Mike Flanagan is not directing it, then they'll just get Tom Holland to star as Joel. Oh wait, that's right. They have Pedro Pascal. They're doing The Last of Us series. I was gonna say like if Mike Flanagan's directing it, then Henry Thomas is gonna be our boy as Joel with a really bad. I'm being harsh on him. A not too terrible Texan accent or Southern accent. But anyway, the moment that Erin gets like attacked by the vampire, she's chopping the vampire's wings and everything like that, is like, that's another one of those like the most Mike Flanagan moments, because it's like she's sacrificing herself and it's this very sort of like disturbing looking creature snacking on her and sucking up all of her blood. But then she starts hearing Riley's description of like what he thinks death is, and mixed with her description. And as she's coming to sort of like her end, you just hear the vampire like, and you're
Also,
like, this is oddly comforting.
More parallels
and
between being a vampire and being an addict. The vampire lives in like a crack house, like a filthy crack house, and when he's using, like, nothing can disrupt him. Like he's literally having his wings sliced to ribbons, and he's like, oh no, this heroin is so sweet, I don't even care.
Yeah, that's something else they establish early, so it's not just out of nowhere when she starts like cutting off this vital component. It's like, what? But wait, because like they have a moment where like someone like hits him with a brick, and he's just like, no, or she or it or whatever the vampire is. It's like, go away, I'm busy. Like I was like, oh, okay, I like that. That's nice. That's a nice touch. Okay, that's fine. So yeah, that's all really good, and yeah, it's that last episode is very poignant, even if I don't love sort of the
fact that everyone dies at the end.
Yeah, like a bad student film, as I always say.
Or like Shakespeare.
No, it's earned. Or like no, Horatio lives, okay? Horatio lives. Hashtag Horatio lives.
Well, Riley's brother lives. Hashtag Horatio.
That's true. Hashtag Horatio of this story.
He really is.
Why does he live? Because he smoked just enough weed. and he's white, and he's the white guy. I don't know. But anyway, so let's see. What other notes do I have about the show? Because I had quite a few. I think. So I do want to, because you said that Bly Manor didn't work for you. Midnight Mass did. There is one thing that I can think of as far as Midnight Mass. Well, there's a couple of things, but the one thing that I want to kind of talk about is, one thing that was nice about Midnight Mass was it didn't stick to the sort of like the miniseries or the TV show trope of like, we will have a bottle episode that focuses on a character. So I like those kinds of things. It's one of those things that you can do in episodic television that you can't really do in a movie, or like you can devote a chapter to a character, but you can't really tell their story. I kind of like that stuff, but I also know that in a series where it's all about the momentum of kind of telling the story and moving it forward, it can slow things down. In Midnight Mass, they incorporate it better in the sense of like, they will spend half of the episode telling this person's story, or they'll sort of like blend the lines between, we need to move the story forward and we need to tell the character-based story. They blend the sort of rough edges of that a lot better, and I think it keeps the momentum moving. Yeah, I don't know your thoughts on that.
I think Midnight Mass is definitely more watchable in the like pacing wise, because it is light on plot. I think like the stories are there's like an overarching story, and there's a lot of like just kind of character centric sub stories. The overarching story is very simple and straightforward, and if that was it, you could tell it in like an hour. But because it has all these sort of underlying character stories, and the plot is so light, and it is more about like theme and character development, psychology and stuff, you can kind of have a whole lot of nothing happening, but it feels like a lot's happening, because like all these characters are going on their own journeys and interacting and changing, and you're learning about them and stuff. So yeah, I mean, it doesn't do the like, this episode is about this character thing that a lot of TV does, which I like that they don't do that.
Right.
Because I think sometimes it's weird, because in a story like this, having a single character focused episode would actually work better than it would in some other shows that are more plot heavy. because, you know, in other shows you're grinding the plot to a halt to give one character's perspective or something. Whereas with this, like, there isn't a whole lot of plot anyway, so it doesn't matter. But I think because they blend it all and no episode is focused on any one thing, it's more that, like, the ideas of the show evolve as each episode goes on. It works really well, and I think it makes it more bingeable and feel like less of a slog, because I think one of the other reason I was hesitant to start Midnight Mass is because I don't like watching TV shows. They're just too much of a time commitment for me.
Yeah, I feel kind of the same. I think we're both kind of in solidarity on that.
Yeah, so but like with this one, it was one where every episode on its own was engaging. The series was very engaging. It was paced really well. And it was like, okay, this is something that, like, I actually do want to follow through on, and I want to know what happens next. I want to know more about these people. And I think, like, always dangling multiple leads in front of you at a time really helps with that, instead of being like, this episode is just about this character. Yeah. And, you know, you kind of have to hope that the next episode is also going to be interesting, instead of like, well, there's all these things that, you know, they still have to resolve, so I kind of want to see what happens.
Yeah. And also, I mean, again, like I said, I like Midnight Mass, but the tone of or I like Bly Manor, but the tone of the two are very different. And I think the fact that you have that one authoritative voice helming every episode is a huge benefit, which is why I want to go back and watch Hill House. Like, yeah. I think Hill House is going to be very similar to Bly Manor, although I think there's a little bit more, like, overt horror in it, whereas, like, Bly Manor was much more of, like, I would say, like, a gothic horror romance, where it was like there's horror elements, but really it's about, you know, like, what's going on, like, the people who are going on in this house, and some of the people just aren't that interesting. Which, like, it's true. Or like, or, you know, like, or like, we're gonna try really, really, really hard to, like, what's his name, the Peter Quint. We're gonna try really hard to, like, justify this terrible asshole and actually make it okay, and, like, have him be redeemed at the end. And it's like, no, fuck you. They repaired that with Midnight Mass. They're like, this person, we don't want you to. She's too far gone. She is irredeemable in the eyes of the audience, but probably redeemable in the eyes of God. So that's fine. That's whatever.
Probably not.
That's fine. Probably not. She's just sitting there with the vampire in hell, and she's like, how did I get here? And it's just like her being attacked by the vampire over and over and over and over again.
Yep.
Man. Yeah, I also, like, you can tell that this was much more of a personal story, just because the themes that it was going for, which is, you know, about death, absolution, alcoholism, addiction, repentance, like, all of those things are very, very focused throughout the entire show, which is nice. It wasn't as much like an homage to, like, a great writer in the sense of, like, someone who just wrote stuff. It was more of just like, this is something that, like, you could tell someone really wanted to do and had a nice budget to be able to do it in a way that was effective.
It did it justice.
Yeah, definitely. Like, don't get me wrong, I like homage-y stories, and I'm really looking forward to the next one that he's doing, the Fall of the House of Usher. Like, I think that will be really interesting, and I'll have a lot of fun with that. Because I appreciate Poe.
I just don't know how well like, stretching a short story into a miniseries will go.
It's gonna be like Bly Manor and Hill House, where they take one author and they
well, Hill House is a novel, though.
Yeah, but I think they incorporated other works by
Shirley Jackson, I think.
By Shirley Jackson, yeah. So I think they incorporated, like, multiple stories, kind of like how Bly Manor incorporated multiple stories of the turning of the screw dude.
Henry James.
Henry James, yeah. Not to be confused with Henry Thomas. And then Henry Thomas will play Henry James in a biopic called Henry Thomas's Henry James. And it'll just be a one-man show.
Henry Thomas is, yeah, he's interesting. Because he's like one of the few Hollywood people who's aged like a real person. Like he's not on the stem cells or whatever that everyone else is on. But also like he everything I see him in, at least Mike Flanagan wise, I don't see him as that character. I just see him as Henry Thomas. I don't know why. I can't separate the actor from the performance. It's always like there's always like a weird level of unreality to whatever he's doing, where it's like, hey, look, it's Henry Thomas. He's pretending to be British now, with that horrendous British accent in Blind Manor.
I love it so much. I'll like go back and just rewatch that opening just to hear him talk of that one episode where it's all about him.
Yeah. Or like in Midnight Mass, he's like, oh, he's like the emotionally disjointed father figure, Henry Thomas. Not like he's not Mr. Flynn or whatever. He's sad old man Henry Thomas. He's like, oh, I'm tough and I have a mustache and I don't know how to express my feelings good, but son,
So I really like Martin Sheen as an actor. Like I'll relate it this way because I was gonna tie it to Leonardo DiCaprio, but I think I'll do this instead. I really like Martin Sheen as an actor. Mm-hmm. Anytime he appears, I don't see him as that character. I just see Martin Sheen acting, which I'm fine with because I like Martin Sheen. But Martin Sheen also is so effortless in all of the roles he takes. Like I remember watching Catch Me If You Can, where he has the Louisiana accent, and it's like, oh, it's Martin Sheen with the Louisiana accent. And then you watch The Departed, where he's the detective and where he's Queenan, which is probably my favorite Martin Sheen role. And he has that Boston accent, whereas everyone else is like, it feels like they're really struggling to put it on, and like, we are from South Boston. It's like Martin Sheen comes on and it's just like, oh, it's Martin Sheen, and he's got a Boston accent. He's so effortless in everything he does. And I feel the same with Henry Thomas. Even though like his British accent was not great in Blind Manor, it still was like very entertaining, and it seemed like he had developed it. It didn't seem like he had a dialect coach who was like schooling him, and he kind of adjusted it based off of what he needed to performance-wise. Like he was doing the performance there. So that's what I would say with Henry Thomas. I was going to say that it was like Leonardo DiCaprio, where every time I see him, it's like, oh, hey, look, it's Leonardo DiCaprio trying to earn an Oscar. But I never see the characters that Leonardo DiCaprio plays. But no, I like Henry Thomas more than that, so I'll compare him to Martin Sheen instead.
Well, I guess my analog is always George Clooney. Because George Clooney plays basically the same character in every movie. But
that's not directed by a Coen brother.
Even in the Coen brothers movies, he's playing the same guy, but like a kind of warped version of it.
The doofy version.
But there's like he makes it look so easy. Like he's that guy 100% in every movie, and yeah, it's like there's just this effortlessness to it where it's like, yes, it's still like, oh, I just kind of see him as George Clooney, like you do with Martin Sheen, but you know, there's no effort. Like he's doing everything right without even trying. Yeah. Whereas Henry Thomas has the same effect, but it looks like he's putting in a huge amount of effort. Like he's trying really hard, and the ending result is, hey, look, it's Henry Thomas. Also, one of the other performances that kind of stuck out, not in the best way, was Zack Gilford, who plays Riley Flynn. Because he has like this Kristen Stewart in Twilight like thing going on where.
That's just his face, dude. He can't.
Well, no, it's more than just his face, I think, because Kristen Stewart in Twilight has this thing where it looks like she knows she's on camera the whole time, and it's self-aware in the worst way possible. And like there's this very clear unease that Riley seems to have, where like he kind of seems like he knows this is a movie or a TV show, and he knows he's on camera, and he's like, I don't want to be on the camera. And it kind of works because his character is like very cagey. But it also seems like it just seems strange because everyone else is like, oh yeah, like we're fake people in a fictional show, and then he's just like, I'm a real person trapped in a TV show.
I'm desperately trying to get out. Okay, so 2 things about Zack Gilford. Well, I guess 3 things. Have you ever watched the Friday Night Lights TV show?
No.
Okay, so he was one of the main characters on it, and that whole show, like all of the younger cast, for the most part, had this sort of like mumblecore, like kind of awkward acting thing going, because it was him and what's his name, the guy who's married to Kirsten Dunst. Oh my God, he was in I'm thinking of Ending Things, the male lead.
Fuck. Jesse Plemons?
Jesse Plemons. Him and Jesse Plemons, like, they both had this sort of, like, mumblecore thing going on, and they were supposed to be best friends in the show. And so, like, a lot of the younger cast kind of, like, had this weird, awkward improv that I feel like they still have in things that I've seen them in.
Huh.
So part of it, I think I'll blame on that. And then also, Zack Gilford was in... The Last Stand with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he plays like the really like dopey, nervous, scary deputy that dies really early on. So I can never not see him as those 2 roles.
That's hilarious.
And then he was also in something for Corridor Digital, and I know Corridor Digital has talked about how like they hired this one actor one time who thought he was like above doing web-based shows, and I really hope it's not Zack Gilford. But I have this like striking feeling that it might be. So, so interesting speculative stories. We're slandering his name here on our podcast, but like I didn't think he gave the worst performance. I thought he was going to be a lot worse. Actually, I thought he was going to be a lot harder to watch.
Huh?
Yeah, based off of my previous experience watching him and stuff. But
yeah, I think the best performance. I mean, the best performance is Hamish Linklater. He goes absolutely fucking crazy in this show. Like he's going to
be hired in a bunch of movies now.
Oh yeah, if he's not like a superstar next year, I'll be shocked because it's otherworldly how good he is.
Yeah.
I mean, he's obviously given a lot of great material to work with, but like holy fucking shit. Anytime he's on screen, he just eats it up and everyone else kind of vanishes. I think a lot of the very like bit parts are done really well. Like the town drunk, the guy who plays the town drunk is really good.
He's really good.
Or like even like Raul Coley, in spite of his awful, distracting, horrendous accent, is pretty good as the sheriff.
He's really good. Yeah, I like him a lot.
Christian.
They keep calling him Omar Sharif. Because this town hasn't done anything significant since the 70s.
Well, it's funny the town drunk calls him Sharif instead of Sheriff. And I'm like, you shouldn't have done that. But his name should have been Ali. So it's Sheriff Ali. That's such a missed opportunity. Like Kate Siegel's good.
She's good. Yeah. It's like I feel like she's
distracting
finally
about her teeth. I don't know what it is, but other than that, yeah, she's really good.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I love how we're just like assaulting these people who've done a really good job. But I was kind of thinking to say I could say something worse, but like I feel like it takes away from like how good she is at like holding down, especially the last couple episodes, as sort of like our sort of point of view character shifts from Riley to Aaron.
Yeah,
she does a really good job.
Yeah, she really. I mean, she's good throughout the show, but I think you're right. She is even better as she becomes the new point of view character. And then obviously, the woman who plays Bev Keane,
Samantha Sloyan,
also delivers the performance of a lifetime because fucking hell, I hate Bev Keane.
Yeah, I hope she doesn't get typecast. Anytime someone does a role like this, it's just like, I really hope you don't get typecast as the really snooty bitch. Like, it's just where I get nervous because, like, I bet she has a lot more range than that, but she was so good at this that it would be easy for people to fall into like, oh yeah, we'll just keep going with her. Oh no. And of course, Henry Thomas is always great. So. Oh man.
Oh, she was in Hush too, Samantha Sloyan.
Yeah, that's one nice thing about like. That's why I was kind of sad that when I rewatched the Snyder Cut a couple weeks ago, when I traveled, I was like, you know what this is missing? Carla Gugino, because she is like a good luck charm in his movies, and like Mike Flanagan realizes this and tries to put her in stuff, and he has a recurring set of people that he likes to constantly bring into his projects, which I appreciate. Oh, speaking of Henry Thomas, did you see Doctor Sleep?
I still haven't.
Okay,
it's still sitting on my shelf.
I'm gonna spoil this one thing for you, and we should do a Doctor Sleep episode. I think it'd be really fun. Henry Thomas plays as Jack Torrance in the movie.
I think you mentioned that.
Oh,
which again sounds like the perfect role for him to just again be like, "Hey, look, it's Henry Thomas."
It's so fun. I was like, "Yeah, dude, this is great." And he got permission from Jack Nicholson too. He was like,
"Nice."
Well, it is.
You know what I think it is like. So like in Gangs of New York, Henry Thomas is like a normal actor. He's like, I believe this character. I believe Henry Thomas. I don't see Henry Thomas. I see the person that he's playing. And then I think all the stuff he does with Mike Flanagan, I don't know if it's the way the character is conceived or if it's the performance, where it's like there's something just a little too cartoonish about it, where it's like the show is going one way, and then it's like, here's a weird cartoon character or like stock type played by Henry Thomas. And that's why, like, maybe because none of his characters always like totally feel real. His performances don't feel real. I don't know. Because it's like, okay, yeah, if he's playing Jack Nicholson, for example, like that's obviously going to like just pull you right out of the movie and be like, oh, hey, look, it's Henry Thomas. He's playing Jack Nicholson. Or like the guy he plays in Bly Manor, especially like the crazy like shit-eating grin that his ghost double always has.
Yeah.
That's like, this is hilariously stupid.
Henry Wingrave. Oh man. Yeah, no, I agree with you, and I think part of it is like the novelty factor, especially with Bly Manor. It's the novelty factor of like, hey, look, this is the kid from E.T. And which is bad. It's like he's done a lot. He's had a very stable, solid career. I always feel bad when like child actors get like when they get Jake Lloyded, where like Jake Lloyd had an okay, maybe promising career as a child actor, does episode 1, you never see him again. And it's like, you know what? At least Henry Thomas, like he, cast in E.T., did a great job in E.T., consistently got work afterwards in spite of being an E.T. And now he's not seen, okay, he probably is still seen as that E.T. kid, but like he has a good body of work that supports him as like, no, I've transcended, I've transcended just being E.T. kid. Like Jake Lloyd, good chance he will never transcend being Anakin from episode 1. Or like Macaulay Culkin leans into the fact that like he was Home Alone kid.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, he probably tried to branch out, but he was too iconic. Like, at least with Henry Thomas, he was able to sort of diversify his portfolio, and now he can like, he's done other things. He's been Jack Torrance, for example.
Yeah.
He's been Henry Wingrave, which is my favorite Henry Thomas performance of all time.
That is the GOAT Henry Thomas
performance. It's so great. I love it. Like, if that's the only thing I get out of Bly Manor, I'm happy with it. Like, that alone makes it... Just watch episode 5, the Henry Thomas episode of Bly Manor. That's it. That's all you need to watch. That one and the last episode. That's it. That's good. But then you're fine.
I'm gonna take the image of his ghost double, like looking like an idiot, smiling, and make that my background for every single piece of hardware that I own.
I could probably give you because I was looking back at that because I was like, oh, Henry Thomas, I want to hear his really bad British accent, so I clicked on it quickly and like looked at it again, and it's like it's actually pretty far ways into that episode. It's like, like 5 or 6 minutes in. But I'm like, yes, it's so worth it every time. Just that goofy looking grin. Yeah. Then he moves from one goofy grin to another one. So are you like a converted Mike Flanagan fan now that you know his sort of his MO and stuff like that? Are you ready to dive further into the filmography?
I am ready to take a closer look at some of his other stuff. I'm not quite at the stage of Mike Flanagan enjoyer, but we're getting there.
Like a lot of the filmmakers kind of his age that are kind of indie, but also doing, like, they started indie, but they've kind of grown through there. I like the fact that he uses a lot of visual effects in his stuff, and he uses it to punctuate, like he uses it in a good way as opposed to like a gratuitous way.
Yeah. We talk about how mid-budget movies don't really exist much. Yeah. But I think Mike Flanagan is kind of I guess in some ways I think he's kind of he is like a true mid-budget director where like he's not indie. He's not doing any blockbusters, but he's making really good stuff that has like high quality production values, but it's not like Star Wars or something.
Yeah. I mean, it's tougher to sort of parse exactly where the budget lies, but it also is kind of sad if we talk about mid-budget movies, because even though he does have some movies to his name, like he hasn't made a movie since Dr. Sleep, and he's been focusing on miniseries. So instead of being able to do movies, he's kind of been exploring ideas in miniseries, which I appreciate, because it allows him to still get as much of the sort of like exploration of film technique out there, but he gets to do it on a much broader canvas. Mm-hmm. But it also means that like the mid-budget filmmaker, like maybe we are just getting rid of it completely. There's only Netflix and like maybe Hulu and Amazon Prime, HBO Max in a very segmented part that will even greenlight them. But these movies aren't going to be making it to theaters. They're going to be released directly for streaming, which is kind of sad as well.
Well, and he's got kind of a sweetheart deal with Netflix, I think. I mean, they really appreciate him and the eyeballs that he brings and the work that he produces. So
yeah, and the eyeballs he keeps. They know like, oh, this is going to be a good investment. I don't know how they chart profit, but I know that part of it is based off of like who watches what, and so like as long as he keeps putting out stuff that people will click on their Netflix queue, Netflix will keep him nice and fat and happy and give him free reign. So I guess it also depends on what you're willing to sacrifice, because I would say that like you were talking about this before about how the plot of Midnight Mass you could have conceived in an hour, or you could have done it in an hour, and it was originally intended to be a movie, I think. And then he evolved it to a TV show and a TV series, put it on the back burner, and this is kind of like his one for you, one for me project. This is the one for me project. So I'm glad it turned out well, but like also it's possibly telling that he's like, well, you know what? I don't necessarily need to see things on a big screen as long as I get to make what I want to make, and I have a better canvas. If I do these miniseries, I can explore themes more, can have more characters, I can hire more of my friends.
And get more views too, because I mean, Netflix will get it in front of people, no doubt.
Unless
and people will watch it. Unless it's Mank. Well, I mean, okay, like what normal person would want to watch Mank though?
What do you mean it's not in stereo sound?
Hey guys, you want to see a movie that's in uncompressed mono? No.
Why is it in black and white? What's with this? I started watching Mank again, by the way.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I like it. I'm really enjoying it. I'm liking it a lot more this time than when I first saw it. I think that's what David Fincher films are, though. Like, with a couple of exceptions, I enjoy the rewatch more than I enjoy the initial watch.
Yeah, I can see that.
Do you have anything more to say on Midnight Mass?
Not really.
I don't think I do either. I really enjoyed it. I think if you've made it this far and have listened to all of the spoilers, I think you should still watch it. It's just really well done.
Yeah, it's a really good little miniseries. And, you know, if Mike Flanagan has a one for you, one for me deal with Netflix, you know, I hope the one for me's do better and better than the one for you's. And Netflix just it's all one for me's from here on out.
They have been pretty good for creators, you know, like for the creators who want it, they have been pretty good. So we'll see. I guess just plug our socials because you're the man to do it.
All right. Email us, video@underthewheels.com. You can listen to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Stitcher. Our channel on YouTube is Under the Wheels. Our website is underthewheels.com, where we have a lot of cool stuff. We've been getting more output lately. There's like a bunch of reviews and things. Matt, you put up a review of House of Gucci recently, which I thought was a fun read, as well as an interesting article about the economics of R ratings and PG-13 ratings. I've had put up a couple reviews. Power of the Dog, which is Netflix's big awards movie this year. Check out the review to learn more about it. And also Deathloop, Game of the Year, 100%.
Is Deathloop, is it for PC and PlayStation? I'm guessing 5?
Yeah.
Okay.
Xbox. It's funny because it's published by Xbox Game Studios, so Xbox will get a release at some point in the future.
I think you just play it. It's like if it's for Xbox, it's also for PC. So if it's for PC, generally
here's the thing: it's published by Xbox Game Studios, but it is a PlayStation exclusive. That is also on PC.
Man, I don't understand. Like, video game economics have gotten so strange. Like, it's just gotten weird. Like, I know Halo Infinite came out, and like the multiplayer is free to play, but then you have to pay for the single player, which makes sense, but it's not really free to play multiplayer because you have to buy the battle passes and stuff. And it's just like,
it's a mess. Free to play multiplayer is a disaster, just because like, if you make a really good campaign, no one in their right mind would pay $70 for a first-person shooter campaign.
Unless it's Doom.
Well, but Doom is amazing, and it really is all about the campaign. Doom multiplayer is fine. It's fine. It's not the centerpiece like Call of Duty, Halo, or Battlefield.
Although I've heard good things about the Halo. I've heard good things about Halo Infinite's campaign, because a lot of people like Halo was one of those few games where it's like it was both. The campaign was really good and the multiplayer was phenomenal.
Yeah, people get super into like the campaigns and the lore and all that. And like I know people who got into the games and like they love the campaign so much they started reading the books. So it's like, oh, that's cool.
See, video games can translate into reading. I don't know about that, but yeah, like the campaign for Halo, like especially when Bungie was helming it, was very, they were very much like, we want to make a good single player component, and a lot of people fell in love with it because of that.
Yep.
Just it indoctrinated just as many people into multiplayer, and then Call of Duty just shot it all to hell, gave all of the good faith away.
Call of Duty used to have such good campaigns too.
Yeah, it used to have. Call of Duty used to be great, and then the team behind Call of Duty decided to be like, no, we don't want to work for you, Activision. You guys suck. And I don't want to touch anything close to. I've never really played a Call of Duty game. They are not for me. Especially like I tend to get really tilted really easily when I play multiplayer games, and Call of Duty. I have calm friends who get frustrated playing the multiplayer of Call of Duty.
Oh yeah.
So.
I think the last Call of Duty game I really played was the original Black Ops.
Wow. So like was that before Modern Warfare 2?
I think that was after Modern Warfare 2.
Okay. Was that the one with Sam Worthington?
Yes. The numbers, Mason. What do they mean?
I swear to you, I'm American. What?
I don't know.
Sam Worthington. Oh, man. God, we could get him on the podcast. That'd be awesome. I'd be like, so, when are you doing the sequel to Wrath of the Titans, man? Okay, one last thing.
I mean, the next 4 Avatar movies are supposed to come out in the next 4 years, so we're gonna get a whole. I mean, if that actually happens and it's not more James Cameron bullshit, yeah, it's gonna be a whole lot of Sam Worthington.
Dude, hey, Kate Winslet did not learn how to hold her breath for 5 minutes for a movie to not come out. Okay, James Cameron's gonna be like Robert Jordan. He's like, all right, I have everything outlined for it. He's gonna die, and then they're gonna have to bring someone else in to finish it. And I just hope it's not Peter Jackson, because Peter Jackson looks like he never wants to go in front of a movie set ever again. He's just like, I'm fucking done. Speaking quickly on Bly Manor, Midnight Mass, and like execution, Wrath of the Titans, horrible movie. I love it though. I don't know why. Well, I kind of know why. Because I think it has the bones and like the beats of something that's really interesting, but just horribly executed. I don't know if you've ever seen Wrath of the Titans.
I think I have, actually.
So they have this big culminating moment where Sam Worthington has to fight Ares.
Yes, I remember this. Oh my god.
Like that, like the build up to that moment is pretty awesome, because they have Sam Worthington like praying to Ares, and Ares is like on top of a mountain and the wind is blowing and stuff, and like the shots are epic. But then when it comes down to the actual fight, it's just kind of like, okay, we're in a temple. We're not really using the temple architecture in an interesting way. It's all shot to shit. It's all cut to shit. Like, what's going on? It was so just like, the premise of it was so good, and the execution was just so bad. And it was the same with like, at the end of the movie when Perseus has the Spear of Tritium, and he's like flying to defeat Kronos, and like Zeus is like, come on, brother, let's have some fun. And then they like shoot little pea shooters out of their fingers like Kumail Nanjiani and Eternals, and it just looks so lame. I'm like, dude, you had such a great line and such a great like execution of that line from Liam Neeson to completely just do nothing with it. Yeah. So when people criticize movies for having bad scripts, just remember, the script can be bad, but a good director can make a bad script better. Yep. You could make an argument that,
or a good script worse.
But a bad director will always make a bad script, no matter how good the script is. It will always be a bad execution. So that's like, and yeah, but that ties very loosely to Bly Manor and Midnight Mass, because I think Bly Manor is better than you say it is. But I think it could have been even better if Mike Flanagan was fully hands-on with it.
Maybe. Also feels way shorter.
That too, yeah. Like every episode is only a half hour. Okay, let's go. But anyway, anything else to say?
No.
All right. Well, in that case, I'm Matthew.
And I'm Gabe.
And you have just been Under the Wheels.
No, yeah, I was just thinking, you're a big Spielberg fan. Spielberg has his West Side Story remake out, which is getting rave reviews, presumably only because it doesn't have subtitles for the Spanish dialogue.
And because they don't have as much brown face.
Well, it's like all the headlines I see are like, West Side Story is one of the best movies of the year. The Spanish doesn't have subtitles.
Yeah.
So like without clicking into the article, like those are the only two pieces of information I have, and because this is how the human brain works, I connect them as being like, oh, this must be a causal relationship. Because, and solely because, the Spanish dialogue has no subtitles, this is one of the best movies of the year, which is a weird criteria for greatness, but okay.
And like, it's
I
like,
thought it was a
wow, I'm super evil. Come on, give me some more whiskey, you bastard. You're a terrible person, and I'm here to remind you of how terrible you are. And then, Henry Thompson's like, no, please, I'm not so bad. I just made some mistakes.
Pick up the phone, Henry Thomas. You need to answer it. You have to answer the phone, Henry Thomas. Fuck, dude, I loved that
so
shit.
Bad.
Was
It's
it scary?
so bad.
No. Was it entertaining as hell for me? Yes.
Christian.